But this is a composition that he calls So Nice, So Nice. to join us. We're going to bring Mr. Kenny Washington back to the drums. And this is going to feature... Go ahead, you. Go ahead. Kenny paid all this money for applause, you might as well get it. We're going to bring out a very special guest. She was married to Elmo Hope. And she's a fine pianist and composer herself. And she's going to come out and talk to you about the next song that she's going to play. Please welcome Miss Bertha Hope.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Eric's done such a fabulous job curating this music and looking at it, and then to have to invite me to do this was a particular honor. Since I am still alive, and a lot of people just ignore relatives, and I just want to thank him for doing this and bringing the family, the Elmo Hope musical family together. Because now there's another generation of people playing this music. Thank you, Eric. Called Something for Kenny. It was written by Elmo for a student of his who was a drummer. So it's a piece written for a drummer. A lot of people thought it was for Kenny Dorham. They were very close. Or for Kenny Clark, who was the drummer who moved early as an expatriate to Europe. But it's for neither one of those Kennys. It's for a student of his, and it's a wonderful piece that you can understand what the lessons were, I think, that Elmo was trying to teach a drummer in it. So, as my offering for the night, Something for Kenny. And it is going to feature in the trio context Kenny Washington on the drums, who probably knows this composition better than I do.
very much. Kenny. I want to get this gentleman's perspective on playing his music because he's not just a masterful jazz musician. He studies the music. And if anybody should start a school, it should be this fella here. But go on platform. He deserves it. So Kenny, if you can just give us a few brief words about what's so special about Elmo Hope's music.
Well, one of the special things about Elmo's music is he grew up at a time when you had some other giant pianists like Bud Powell and also Thelonious Monk and a little known figure by the name of Herbie Nichols. But the interesting thing about Elmo is he absorbed some of what Bud was into and some of what Monk was into, but he made it his own. But the harmonies, when I first heard his music many years ago, I'd heard the name, but I wasn't really familiar with too many of his records. I had a few, but I didn't really pay attention to them. And then around New York, there was some concerts called Piano Pinnacle Concerts, which was a tribute to Sonny Clark, and also one of them was a tribute to Elmo. So I started getting into Elmo's music. The records were so hard. I mean, the melodies were so hard that, never mind the solos, it took me months just to understand the melodies and how they would weave the odd forms, the chord changes and things that he was using. It was all bebop and everything, but it was a logical extension to bebop. So rough music, and I tell you, the reason why no one plays Elmo's music is because it's too hard. And most musicians are too lazy. I'm serious, but one thing I mean, that's the truth, really. Really, I mean, look, they don't call it a jazz maniac for nothing. Really. But I will say this, because we're going to get back to the music, so, but I will say this. Eric is the only young musician that I know of that actually took the time to do his homework on Elmo's music. You can't rough this stuff off. You can't be a chump. This music will kick your backside. I would say American Top 40. So I don't know of any other young musician who is taking the time out to study his music. It is not easy. I've been playing this stuff for a long time and listening to it. And man, I'm still back there. I made a few mistakes, a few clickers myself. But the thing about it, one thing I will say is that this music is, you know, a lot of people write music, it's hard for the sake of being hard. I mean, this is time changes and there's all these chords and demolished sevenths and all this kind of stuff. You know, but one thing though, really, but one thing about Elmo's music is it's hard, but there are rewards. You know, you look at the music and you struggle with it, when you start really digging into it, you say, this is hard because this is that, and you start to say, I see. So if I get this part, I understand. There are rewards. Because I played a lot of music that is hard, and when you get through with the concert, you're dragging your butt up the street, man. It's hard for the sake of being hard. It's tiresome. But this music is inspiring. So I'm gonna let Eric get back to his announcement, but I just wanted to say, I don't lie, especially when it comes to music. And I always speak my mind. That's why I get in trouble all the time. But one thing I will say though is that you have to. I think everybody should stand up for Eric because he's done a magnificent job. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true.
The next tune. Wow. He's not a liar, that's for sure. He didn't rehearse that. I mean, Thank you, Kenny, for that brief interjection. I'm afraid to do this. Are there any? I'd like to take a couple of questions, if anybody has any. This is a little bit unusual. Don't be afraid to ask. Anybody? Nobody? Yes. Who's that? Yes, sir. Could you stand up?
What part does improvisation play in what you're doing? How much is improvised? Nothing? Part of it? How much?
You're trying to tell me you think that we're reading all this stuff? What part does improvisation play in what we're doing? Well, first, I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that all jazz is improvisation or that half of jazz is improvisation. All of the components, and this is just my take on it, all of the components are important. You have melody, you have harmony, you have rhythm, you have Tin Pan Alley compositions by George Gershwin, you have the innovations of Thelonious Monk and Charlie Parker. But I don't want you to make the mistake, in my opinion, of believing that you don't have jazz if you don't have improvisation. There are whole pieces that are written by people like Duke Ellington and some of these pieces that Elmo Hope played that are all written out, and there's no improvisation, at least not on the record. Improvisation in this particular instance plays a very large part of what we're doing because the compositions themselves really stand all on their own. And if we didn't improvise on them, the tunes would still be just as great. But it just so happens that Elmo Hope did compose a structure of chords that we were allowed, that he permitted us, thank God, to blow over. But again, if we didn't play any solos, it would be a much shorter concert. But again, it would still be great music nonetheless. I think improvisation is only one of the components, and it's a major component. It's only one of the components that makes jazz music so great. But you have the written component, you have the spontaneous, you have the creative, you have the melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic component that all makes jazz great. So improvisation plays a very large part of what we're doing. Yes, yes.
What would you suggest is like a good beginning, like an introduction as far as like getting a CD to listen to stuff by Elmo Hope?
Very good question. I'm going to let Kenny answer that.
Blue Note, Elmo Hope Trio, and Quintet. It's on Blue Note. That's the first one that you should get because you can understand the first period of Elmo's growth. This is the bebop era with Charlie Parker and Bud Powell. He grew up amongst those great musicians. That's the first record that you should get to understand the beginnings of Elmo. That's what Eric was saying before. Once you absorb that music on that record, then get the Elmo Hope Trio on contemporary records. It's a yellow covered record, got a little picture of Elmo in the middle with Jimmy Vine and Frank Buckler. Check that one out. That's one of them first. And then when you absorb that one, then study the second one. Also, Elmo Hope Homecoming, that's a good one. Many of them are good.
You really can't go wrong. One more question. Yes, ma'am.
As a non-musician, can you elaborate a little bit more about what is so hard about it? As a listener, it's not hard to listen to. Like when Kenny said some things are hard just to be hard, some things are really hard to listen to and sound really complicated, but it's easy to listen to. So what makes it so hard to tell?
Well, if I may be so bold and so arrogant as to say what makes it so easy to listen to is all these bad motor scooters we have up on the stage. And the fact that we rehearsed this music for 3 hours. That's what makes it very, very easy to listen to. There's nothing like having a tight band of musicians who are not just good players. Improvising to me, and again, I'm not trying to downplay improvising. Improvising is, to me, relatively one of the easier components in jazz music. And I preface with that by saying, being a good musician is much harder. Because the conception of practicing or learning how to play over chord changes, you do that by yourself. Doing things by yourself is not that hard. But when you have to come together in a band and play parts in tune, play the rhythms correctly, Everybody has to swing together. It has to feel good. That's very, very difficult. And most people, like Kenny Washington said, are lazy. They don't really, really want to do that. Most guys would be just happy to just they'd be much happier doing that. They really would. But the idea of coming together like this, it's a community. It's a very communal effort. What makes it hard, I know what makes it hard for me. I'll speak for myself. I hate reading music. I hate it. I hate reading music. You understand what I'm saying? I hate it. I don't like it a lot. Because when I'm on stage, when I'm playing music, I want to just play music. So if I had been a good boy, I would have committed all this music to memory. But I simply didn't have the time to do it. And I've been living with this music for the past year. But situation being what it was, I didn't really have a chance to commit. I have a few things committed to memory. But what makes it hard, again, nailing the rhythms, I find to be very, very difficult. You take a song like that. There's a song that we didn't play called Sins of Plenty, which was written for somebody who sings? Lefty Sims? Was he a drummer? A piano player named Lefty Sims. Now that song, I'm not even going to try to sing it for you, but it sounded like I was speaking in tongues or something. But it's a very difficult composition to play. Now, I thought that I was playing, some of Elmo's harder pieces, some of his, more complex pieces. But there's some stuff that we left out. I don't mind telling you that, because we want the sound good. You know what I'm saying? But what makes it so difficult, like the piece that we're getting ready to play, I'm trying to talk as long as I can to avoid. The absolutely inevitable. I may just skip over it entirely, which is my choice as jazz curator. This piece that we're getting ready to play is so tricky, and I guarantee you it's going to be very short. We're not going to play long on this. It's going to be very short. But there's odd bars, and there's odd bar phrases, and there's a 5/4 bar, there's a 6/4 bar. And speaking with Miss Hope, the way that I transcribe the pieces, it works. All the beats are there, and all the bars are there. But for instance, we have, and this is just a simple matter of addition, so I'm not about to throw you, for a loop. There's a bar of 6/4. There's 6 quarter notes in one beat. Now you can divide that into 4 and 2. 4 beats and 2 beats. You still have 6. Or you can make it a 6/4 bar. And we were having a conversation about this yesterday. So all of that helps to make the music, difficult to play. The fact that Elmo's own handwritten pieces, for the most part, are non-existent. So we have to rely on, thank God, Bertha Hope, who's still around to show us the way. She corrected a whole lot of wrong notes that I heard that were on the record. But that's the way they played it. But she said, no, that's not what it is. They played it wrong. This is what it's supposed to be. Thank God for her. And there's a gentleman by the name, please give her a hand. There's also a gentleman by the name of Don Sickler who has transcribed a great deal of this music. And you have a whole bunch of, David Berger, you have a whole bunch of guys who have, really put in some time transcribing this music. And even they come up with mistakes. Because if you don't have the exact source, if you don't have the score in front of you, you're pretty much left at the disposal of your own ears, which can deceive you. We were going back and forth about certain notes here and there, and they're very important. So those are all the things that make it complex. All right, here it is. You want to play this, Bert? It's about her. Half of these songs that Elmo, Don Sickler's here. Don, stand up. Don Sickler. There's a couple of songs that Elmo Hope understood people. I think an artist is most effective when he really understands human beings. He understands that it's not just music. It goes beyond the musical component. It becomes a component that goes into a human, very human spiritual thing. And Elmo, I believe, really, really, truly understood people. And he wrote a lot of songs that were about his friends and musicians and about Miss Hope here. And this next song is called La Berthe. very happy about this, because see, this is going to feature the drummer. And, I get a little bit of a break, because nobody's going to solo on this but Kenny. This is a composition that was commissioned by a drummer from the West Coast named Lenny McBrown. And this appeared on the very first Pacific Jazz recording. I believe it was PJ-1, something like that. Don, is that right? This is the album is called Lenny McBrown and the Four Souls. Very, very interesting album. A very, very good group, and they didn't make too many recordings, unfortunately. Very good group. But this song, this song here. Now, I'm not even talking about it. This song is called McBrown's Galaxy. McBrown's Galaxy. beautiful lady. Elmo wrote the song for Miss Bertha Hope called Eyes So Beautiful As Yours. And we're going to finish off the evening by thanking you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if you realize how important it is that you support this kind of thing. You are one of the most important components in the music. You may think that you're just sitting there waiting to clap when somebody plays something. But the reason that we're even here is because we have an audience that wants to hear this music. Otherwise, we'd just be up here playing for ourselves, which we wouldn't have a problem doing. Except we'd be doing it for free. But we want to continue to expose great music. And I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Duke Ellington or Louis Armstrong or Wycliffe Gordon or Mike Rodriguez. I don't care whose music it is. Come and check it out. In fact, Mike and his brother Robert are playing at Cleopatra's Needle tomorrow night. Go check it out. I want to see all of you. I won't be there. I'm going out of town. But Mike's going to tell me, go and check the gig out. Take a chance that you might get turned away, pack the place out. But go and check out music. It's a lot cheaper than it'll be tonight. But it's going to be a great band. It's he and his brother, the Rodriguez brothers, and they're playing with some wonderful musicians at Cleopatra's Needle. Ask them about the gig. Talk to them. Talk to us. Ask us where we're playing. Websites and internet. It's all available. And again, we want to thank you for coming out. We're going to close by backtracking just a little bit in years. This is a piece from about 1956. But it's what we call basically a blowing tune. Back in those days, there were a lot more of what we call blowing dates. And basically, the labels, the Blue Note and Prestige and Columbia, they would get a bunch of musicians together, throw them in the studio, and they'd come up with some music, and they just play over some tunes. Well, this is our final Elmo Hope composition entitled Ouija. Ouija. And it's just a little riff that he wrote for the horns, and it's based on Charlie Parker's composition, Confirmation. This is Ouija. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you very much.